Thank you very much, Maria and Fajar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first plenary session of ISIC. My name is Yoga Permana. I am the PhD student in London School of Economics. In the next 1.5 hours, I will be moderating this session entitled Escaping the Middle Income Trap Through Innovation and Re-Industrialization. Previously, Mas Menteri in his insightful talk has emphasized how technology can create so much economic opportunity in the future. In this session, we will focus on the role of technology in transforming our economic trajectory, especially in the context of industrialization and the structural transformation. In the last 50 years, Indonesia has experienced a structural transformation, shifting the major economic activities from agricultural to the modern sector, such as manufacturing and service. The contribution of manufacturing sector in particular has a positive impact on Indonesia's economic development, leveling up Indonesia from poor country into middle income country. However, currently we have faced the challenge of deindustrialization, or a declining contribution of manufacturing on the aggregate of our economy. Indonesia's deindustrialization is considered too premature. We shift too fast to the service-based economy before our manufacturing sector reach the highest potential. To achieve our goal of Indonesia Emas 2045, to level up our country into the high-income economy, to escape from the challenge of the middle-income trap, we believe that we must rebuild our manufacturing sector, or we call it as re-industrialization. We should learn from East Asia miracle, such as South Korea, Japan, and China, who really focus to build high-tech manufacturing industry, upgrading their products into high value-added industries to achieve the high-income status. This session, thus, will discuss the role of re-industrialization and innovation in the future, and how we learn from structural transformation experience in the past. To discuss this topic, we have 4 speakers representing academician, business, and government. Let me introduce you to all of them. The first speaker, we have Professor Andy Sumner. He is the Professor of International Development in King's College London. His area of expertise is poverty, inequality, and inclusive growth in developing countries, including Indonesia. The second speaker is Professor Arif Ansori Yusuf. He is the Professor of Economics in Universitas Pajajaran and also the visiting professor at King's College London. He is also the alumni of the UK, received his master's degree from the University College London. The third speaker is Ibu Amalia Adininggar Widyasanti. She is the Deputy of Economic Affairs, Ministry of National Development Planning. And the last is Pak Agus Cahayana Wirakusuma, President Commissioner of Indonesia Battery Corporation. He was also the former commissioner of the State Mining Holding Company. Each presenter today will have a total 10 to 15 minutes for their presentation. We will hold all questions until the end of the session. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions for the presenters, please use the chat feature in this Zoom webinar. So the first speakers are Professor Andi and Professor Arif, who co-authored paper regarding the structural transformation in Indonesia and how it affects our economic development, especially the income distribution. So Professor Andi and Professor Arif, the time is yours.
Thank you very much. Could I have permission to share the screen? At the moment, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Right. So you should see some PowerPoints now, I think. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I can see it clear.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to speak to this group in particular. We've had a lot of Indonesian students at master's and PhD level at King's College London. So much so, maybe one day we'll challenge the other universities in the world that are supporting Indonesia too. I think what we're going to talk about now is really questions of the relationship between economic development and inequality. So we often think about inequality as something that is typically driven by changes in policy. That's true, but to some extent, inequality is also very much about changes in the structure of the economy and the kind of work and employment that's available at any particular time. Indonesia has been incredibly successful over the years at building industrialization. It's one of the relatively few number of developing countries that have achieved tremendous progress. Of course, that progress comes with challenges, and I think over the last 10 years or so, Indonesia's seen, more than 10 years, has seen some of those challenges around sustaining economic development and sustaining industrialization. So the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about the global picture and some work we've been doing with the United Nations University. Then Arif is going to cover a paper that we've been working on the Indonesian case of economic development and inequality. And then I'll come back for some words at the end. Do post the questions and maybe we can deal with them as we go along, or maybe at the end of it. Okay, so hold on. Okay, so first of all, let me say what we're talking about here is really something that's a dilemma for developing countries, and we've used the framing developers dilemma in the book we've just done with the United Nations, where we look across 9 countries, including Indonesia. Principally, developing countries are pursuing 2 goals. One goal is economic development and the transformation of the economy from low productivity to high productivity activities. And secondly, trying to make that process or growth that comes out of that process inclusive and broad-based, so that poverty is reduced and so the benefits are spread across society. Now, historically, and particularly with reference to the famous Kuznets curve and Simon Kuznets' seminal paper, there's the suggestion that there's a tension between these two, in a sense that economic development, structural transformation often leads to upward pressure on inequality, and thus the inclusivity of growth may be hindered as a result of that. And we'll talk a little bit about the global picture around these kind of questions before Arif takes over on the Indonesia paper. So we look at the one question is, well, okay, there may be a tension in some instances, but actually there's different kinds of economic development, different kinds of structural transformation. And so let me just cover some of those. So first of all, the graph is representative of the Kuznets hypothesis. So for Kuznets, inequality is composed of within and between sector inequality. So inequality within the rural sector, or inequality within the urban sector, but also inequality between the sectors. And so this relationship is particularly important in thinking about how things change over time in terms of inequality. Then we tend in some ways to think about industrialization and economic development as a unified concept. Actually, what we discuss in the book is that there are the various forms of economic development and various forms of structural transformation. And so we look at the relationship between manufacturing employment and manufacturing value added, and propose a number of different modes of economic development, some more desirable than others in terms of value added and employment creation. And then what we did in the book was to look at how these things have existed across time, across 9 developing countries. So on the left-hand side, what we did, we looked at different periods of history, working with researchers from each of the countries who each wrote a chapter. And you can see that Indonesia, for the 1970s and the 1980s into the mid 1990s, up to the up to the Asian financial crisis was very much, in our view, in a process of upgrading industrialization and proceeding very rapidly. However, since then, and in the book we use a global data set that runs up to 2012. Indonesia seems to have moved into what might be called stalled industrialization, in a sense, the process of possibly even deindustrialization, depending on the exact definition. And this matters a lot because on the right-hand side, you can see that you can think about periods of history and countries and whether a country is achieving growth-enhancing economic development, growth-enhancing structural transformation, and its impact on inequality. And so historically, I think you can certainly see around the sort of mid-70s and mid-90s, Indonesia was achieving strong structural transformation, expansion of manufacturing, employment of value added, and inequality was largely stable or declining. However, when you go into the post-Asian financial crisis period, the picture that you find is one of weaker structural transformation, but also of actually increasing inequality. So countries, of course, can move between these quadrants, and in many cases it's desirable. So maybe one of the questions for Indonesia and other countries is how to move back into that bottom right quadrant. Of course, Indonesia during the 70s and 80s and 90s was very successful in addressing urban-rural divergence with very strategic and substantial rural investments. Indonesia was also very good at seeking to address divergences between low and higher skilled workers through the expansion of education. And I think those are part of that story in terms of Indonesia's success during that period at trying to address the tensions that may arise during rapid economic development. So what are the contemporary trends for developing countries? Well, contemporary trends are a bit worrying. I think economic development was never easy, and I think actually economic development is becoming harder for developing countries. The nature of economic development has shifted. Instead of building national industries, even national products, it's about inserting into global value chains and being domestic suppliers to international companies in terms of those global value chains. At one level, insertion into global value chains is easier because countries don't need to build an entire industry. On the other hand, it's actually much harder because so many different developing countries are competing over the same entry points, the same industries, the same entry points. So there's actually incredibly intense competition. And I think that makes things harder now than it was in the 1970s and 1980s. And actually, there's a bigger philosophical question that maybe developing countries won't end up with the kind of economic development you see in richer countries, but they'll end up with a kind of a hindered process whereby, yes, there may be economic activity from producing or one particular component into a value chain. On the other hand, it doesn't transform the economy into a high productivity economy, and because of the vulnerability of losing that access point to the value chain in the future. And it's also not, it doesn't build national industries. It typically builds, a small number of very good internationally competitive companies. And of course, the employment from that may be more for medium and high skilled workers. So I think there's some big questions about economic development. And you can see some of these trends on the left-hand side. You can see that developing countries, the average, this is a median value across the data set, prior to 1990 and the emergence of global value chain world, you could see developing countries were doing okay. I think, manufacturing, employment shares were rising. Post 1990, things seem to have stalled for the median or the average developing country in the data set. And you can see that in the Groningen 10-sector database, which runs up to 2012. You can also see it in the UNIDO, the UN data set that runs up to 2018 on the right. You can see this process whereby industrialization, expansion of manufacturing employment seems to have stalled. It's certainly not expanding in the way it once was. The UNIDO data is potentially more important because it's about formal manufacturing. And then we turn to inequality in the top right-hand graph. And as you can see, the expansion of manufacturing is incredibly equalizing. There's a strong association between expanding manufacturing shares in employment and a declining gross income per capita Gini. The gains from tertiarization are much more questionable. If you look at the FIRE sector, so financial, real estate, modern services that are very good at generating value added, maybe much less good at generating large amount of employment. They tend to be unequalizing because they benefit high school workers. Non-FIRE services, traditional services, health, education, hotel, retailing, that sort of lower productivity services that are weaker at value-added expansion, but pretty good at employment expansion, seem to be slightly unequalizing, but then that bend later on higher levels of income. So that's the kind of global picture. Let me hand over to Arif for the Indonesia picture and then come back at the end to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Maybe Andy would help me to move slides forward later. Yeah? But before I continue, I think Andy and I has been a long collaborator, and I encourage all of the students here to come back to Indonesia, not only bring your degree, but also bring your international colleague as a collaborator. I think that will give you a very great benefit, yeah, because when you come back, then you can always have to do research with your international partner. And I appreciate the topic that the committee has initiated. Why? Because we are talking about reindustrialization, or in principle structural transformation. But by speaking about this particular topic with Andy, I think this will be a good reminder that structural transformation vis-a-vis reindustrialization, for example, not only aiming for a high economic growth, right? Because economic growth is not the sole objective of development. Yeah? There are other objectives of development. It's basically quality of life, standard of living, and the standard and GDP is not the sole indicator of standard of living. There are others, and one of them is, of course, income distribution, so inequality or inequality. How the benefit of that growth is distributed. So let's begin with the next slide. So here basically I would like to share the empirical analysis that we just did and published. Basically, we're using 25 years of household survey data. Yeah? We use the macro data in that household survey, but also we use the aggregate of those micro data to construct 7,000 observation in terms of district year. So basically, in addition to analyzing individuals, we also analyzing regions. And for this, we do several analysis, distribution of consumption. But now we can distinguish household head in terms of the sector of which they work. So we can identify the sector where these people work. So we also can analyze the distribution within certain particular sector. And then we also do some analysis like index of inequality and regression analysis. So the first set of results is about the next slide. So it's about how income distributions has changed in Indonesia in different sectors, in different variety of sectors. As you can see from the right side of the slides, you can see we have 6 sectors. And then from each sector, we have two particular year in 1992 and then 2017. And as you can see, as the distribution move to the right, that means we have development, right? But as you can see here, if the shape of the distribution become fatter, yeah, so you can see from the maximum where the maximum is reached. Yeah? If the maximum is reached is lower, it means you have more unequal distribution. So as you can see, that as it move forward, as it develops, so the economy develop higher income on average, then you see also the inequality also increase. And this happen in all of these sectors. So what we are saying is those distribution change into more unequal is not only in certain sector. Even in agriculture sector itself, the income distribution has deteriorating. And the deterioration of this income distribution is quite visible, except for finance, because finance originally it's already been unequal. So when we move to the right, it only a slightly change, yeah, but more unequal, but slightly. But the rest of the sector, where I can consider non-negligible or very significant change in income distribution. But the message is it happened in all sectors without exceptions. So, and the next slide shows something else. In the next slide, basically, referring to what Andy mentioned in the first slide about how the change in the distribution can be decomposed into within or between sectors. Let's say, so which one has been which one has been stronger, yeah, in explaining at least the income distribution change within this particular period. So as you can see, the more red the color is, the more unequal. So the more green, the less unequal. And you can see the overall inequality changing from basically green to red. And then you can see here, for example, early in 1990 early, you can see that agriculture sector has been much less unequal compared to non-agriculture, because of the color I can see. However, when we move toward more current period, you can see that agriculture sector changed from green to yellow, and the non-agriculture sector changed from orange to red. So it means both in agriculture sector and in non-agriculture sectors experience changing income distribution toward more unequal. But then the other one, the within sector and between sector, basically suggests that there is not much changing inequality between those agriculture and agriculture sector. So the within sector has been more contributing to the inequality changing. So the between sector inequality change almost nothing, barely doesn't change. So there is no dynamic in terms of the intersectoral change in inequality, but within sector. So what happened? If there is something that happened in Indonesia, it's something happened everywhere in all sectors and maybe in all regions. And so this is not a little bit. Maybe this can give more empirical picture of the graph that Andy showed at the early. And next slide is about with this data, this district level data for this 25 years, actually we want to see the pattern. So we see the pattern, how we move, when the structural transformation can be represented by the move of share, the moving from the left to right in the horizontal axis. So that's a representation basically of a structural transformation. So as you can see, for example, so in agriculture sector, for example, it's quite clear basically. Yeah? It's quite clear, not that steep, but it's quite clear that the more the region becoming less agriculture, the more inequality. So agriculture will be lower inequality. However, what matters is which sector out of non-agriculture, and then when, as Andy mentioned before, that also happened not only in Indonesia, it's important as well in many parts of the world. But one is notable here, for example, is in terms of the manufacturing sector, in terms of the industry. As you can see that in the manufacturing sector, which is on the very left bottom, as you can see, that basically in 1990s, so there is not much correlations between share of manufacturing and inequality, and there is a little tend toward more tension. So more the slope is steeper, but not that visible. But there is some differences. And what I want to also point it out is about service sector. The service sector, for example, market service such as finance, you can see the slope is quite positive. But what is also most important is the non-market services. So where the majority of Indonesian worker work is in the sector that represented in the bottom right panel of the distribution of the picture. So as you can see here that overall, and also using the more recent period, sample of recent period, the slope is positive, mean that the tertiarization that happened in Indonesia actually tend to be more generating more income inequality instead of inclusive one. So we didn't end up here. So we also try to test it with certain regression analysis, which I can show in the next slide, where actually conclude that, as what Andy mentioned before, it depends on particular period, and that period can be different kind of structural transformation, and that structural transformation in policy as well as other aspect of government intervention. As Andy mentioned, for example, in the 1990s, you have a very good agricultural infrastructure investment that may help. But you can see here in the table using the regression analysis where I show this equation. So I can see that you can see here that the manufacturing sector actually, after controlling many variables, as you can see the picture before that I show you is doesn't control for various factors. But here we control for various other factors, and then you can see here that in 1990s, we found that the relationship between industrialization into manufacturing actually reducing inequality. The association is negative, that is significant. However, when you go to the more recent period, 2001-2017, the relationship changed. And then what is more concerning is the service. Let's forget about finance. We cannot really do much of financial sector. Financial sector has been non-inclusive in terms of development, but non-market services is positive both in 1990s as well as in the era of 2000s. So that's something to think about. And the last one that I'd like to point it out is, sorry, before I haven't, okay. So with this equation, because you can see the square term in the equation, actually we can calculate if there is Kuznets tension, where is the turning point? If there is an increase if the structural transformation, like increase in inequality, but as Kuznets suggests that it will end somewhere and then it will leveling off. So we try to do that and try to calculate where is there any prospect of declining sometime in the future. And then when our calculation suggests actually that turning point is very, very far away. So from the standpoint that the turning point are considerably above the current district mean, and basically only few districts now has labor share above those turning point. So this come to the next slides, which can show you that the tertiarization basically is a still strong secular trend. It's still a secular trend. I don't think tertiarization is easy to be stopped. So if it cannot stop, then if this result continue, that it means that the tension between the structural transformation in the context of tertiarization, then will have keep us more and more tension toward inclusiveness of the growth. So we are seeing not a very good prospect in terms of making peace with this dilemma that Andy mentioned previously. Next. Okay, before I return the slide to Andy, I would also share what we think about why there are so many different impact of this structural transformation in terms of the period where it happens. And in particular, in the period of 2000, last 2 decades, I think there are at least 4 that we have in mind. First is that after the Asian financial crisis, there is a high intensity of capital in terms of the development. And then we also have changing industrialization relation because labor movement is more, more fluid because we have democracy. We have also exchange rate adjustment because of the crisis has made our Indonesian currency devalued quite a lot. And then from international perspective, of course, we also have China accession to the WTO, where manufacturing sector has been main part of the China, the impact of this accession. And then the last one that I think this is also part of the current research project that we also did with UNU. We did collaborate a lot with Andy and some from Manchester and Professor Kunalsen from Manchester. As you can see, Andy mentioned previously shows so many study where actually a collaboration between 3 institutions, King's College and then UNU and and then Manchester. Yeah. Now I think I would like to return the slide or give the slide back to Andy so you can discuss what will be the future policy alternative that we have. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I think these are big issues, not only for Indonesia, but for many middle-income countries that are facing issues of stalled industrialization, even signs of premature deindustrialization. And so with this very dramatic expansion of the service sector, particularly low productivity services, and also the kind of the inequality consequences of these. So the question arises is what to do about this. And I don't think there are easy answers. Essentially it comes down to a question of, on the one hand, countries could try and promote high value added services that are traded internationally. So one impact of the pandemic and COVID has been a dramatic investment in digitalization by international companies. So Baldwin and others have written very much about this, what they call tele-migrating, whereby international services are increasingly tradable. So for example, finance, legal, record keeping for health matters. All of these jobs don't have to be done in rich countries. They can be done wherever people have the skills. And I think this presents some real opportunities for countries who are able to access these particular global value chains and services. It entails a very highly skilled workforce, and I think it's really competitiveness in this area is dependent on a very strong university sector, producing people with the kind of skills that are necessary in finance, legal services, and also inevitably strong strengths in English speaking and writing, although actually the English ability may not be an issue so much with artificial intelligence and translation services that are now incredibly strong. The issue with this particular approach of promoting higher value added services is it probably won't generate much employment. It will generate some, and it will generate employment for high skilled people, and that's important, and that it can generate a lot of value added, but it's not really a strategy for mass employment. On the other hand, Indonesia, like other middle-income countries, could seek to boost industrialization, trying to support more state-owned enterprises or domestic private companies entering value chains. This potentially can create a lot of jobs. The issue is that many countries are competing over the same entry points, and so it's not easy. It's also predicated on, it's an economic development strategy predicated on the very aspect of the global economy that I think is leading to a lot of stalled industrialization. and specifically this point that so many countries are competing over the same entry points and similar industries, activities, and entry points. So it's trying to find a niche in those in global value chains, and then trying to protect that niche from competition is one strategy that you can see that certainly that's what rich countries have pursued. Rich countries have a lot of advantages that things are much harder for developing countries. I think in rich countries you have very in many rich countries, not all, but you have very well established high quality universities, research innovation, R&D spending is much higher. And you have the kind of branding advantages of made in Germany or made in France that actually make quite a big difference. So I think this reindustrialization strategy would be good at creating more jobs, but I think it's a tough thing to achieve. And actually, maybe experimentation is one process where it could be pursued. On the other hand, the tertiarization into high services is also challenging. I mean, of course, it's also possible to expand services around public goods, health and education in particular. And I think the expansion of education and secondary and higher education expansion in quantity and quality would certainly be a very important part of either of these directions.
I'm sorry, Professor Andy, you have 2 minutes left.
Yeah, so this is the last slide. So really, when it comes to questions of inequality and economic development, it's really about trying to weaken this tension whereby the flow of workers from one sector to another, or even within the same sector to higher productivity activities, has a tendency to be associated with rising inequality. Of course, governments can and do intervene. The Indonesian government was very clever in rural investments and expanding education in the 1970s and 80s, and that's an important part of the story. I think on the tertiarization side, there's really an issue of skill upgrading, thinking about issues of that automation and technology. Many of the jobs in manufacturing that existed in the 1970s, 1980s may already be far fewer in number. Social protection, I think, is going to become increasingly important. It already is, but it's going to be increasingly important as some of these challenges of economic development become more acute. And then on the reindustrialization side, of course, you can have active industrial policies. It's very difficult for governments to really sort of pick winners. On the other hand, many countries provide subsidies, and it's particularly to high tech and those issues around supply and distribution of global value chains and entering global value chains for exports. I think with the shifts in technology, it sort of pushes towards thinking much more about digital technology, higher value-added manufacturing. So again, no easy answers, but certainly a very clear sense that the process of economic development is changing, and thus to pursue economic development and inclusive growth is becoming harder, but not impossible. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Andy and Professor Arif. It's very insightful thought from you that structural transformation, innovation, technology is not only about the growth, but also how it's distributed. And at the end, you also give some options for our futures, whether we focus on tertiary with high value added service with upgrading skill, but or another option is to rebuild our industry, or we say it as re-industrialization. So the second speaker is very relevant in this question. This is Ibu Amalia, who will share to us the government initiative, how to rebuild our manufacturing industry or our service sector in the future in terms of the next structural transformation for the better of Indonesia. Ibu Amalia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pa Yorga, and all distinguished participants of this event. First of all, we really thank you to be invited to this important discussion. And the topic is really relevant and also really interesting that actually the Ministry of National Development Planning is now really concerned on how Indonesia can really move up and transform its economy, as well as that we really also concerned with the what do you call it, to re-industrialization of Indonesia. So let me share my screen. So this is what we would like to share with you all regarding that, that actually one way to escape from middle income trap is actually through innovation and reindustrialization. As you know that Indonesia economic growth in first quarter of 2021 is, we are seeing that it could be a step towards recovery, even though the risk is still there, because Indonesia is now having, an increase in.
I'm sorry, Bu
Yes.
Amalia, the slide is not full.
Oh, really? Let me check what happened with this one. How about now? Is that okay?
Still waiting.
Is it now okay?
No, it has not appeared yet. Yes, now it's clear.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now.
okay. All right. So as you know that Indonesia economic growth in first quarter of 2021, it could be a step towards recovery, even though we are now still there's still some risk in Indonesia due to an increase in COVID-19 cases. And even now, daily cases of Indonesia is now the highest among the country in the world. Daily about like almost 40,000 cases a day. So we hope that we can really, overcome this pandemic situation and can reduce the number of cases. And with that, we hope that Indonesia can really could have a positive growth in 2021. I just would like to share with you that the pace of global manufacturing recovery in global market is varied actually. So the pace of recovery in each subsector will be affected by the intensity of the impact during the pandemic. And if you look at it by sectors and by country, then for example, in Japan, manufacturing industry will recover actually in 2021 in the second quarter, also in the US and the Eurozone. But there is like some, so for example, textile, leather, and garment industry could recover later. But like automotive machinery and also, for example, chemical and pharmaceutical industry in Eurozone and the US has recovered now, especially in the US in the first quarter of 2022. But the thing is that for automotive industry and machinery and metal goods industry in Japan can recover faster. And for your information, in Indonesia, metal industries, metal-based industries, especially in some of industrial estate out of Java Island, it is have showing impressive growth, even though it is in the mid of COVID-19 pandemic. The growth is positive actually, and we also see that the metal-based industry in Kawasan industry, we call it industrial estate in in Central Sulawesi, and also in the North Maluku can be the cushion during the COVID-19 pandemic year. And then it can cause the economic growth of that provinces can still be positive during 2020. So I think we believe that if we have a very strong industries, it can be a good cushion for a country, especially if the country have the a good resources. Have a comparative advantage, and we industrialize that sector. It could be a good way for that country to be more resilient during the crisis. Again, we would like to benchmark actually the policy responses for manufacturing development in some countries. For example, in Italy, what the policy response is for manufacturing development in the mid of COVID-19 pandemic. For example, in Italy, the policy focuses on agricultural sector and primary needs, and also tourism, trade, culture, and manufacturing sector. And the government gives some incentives to be implemented, such as for fishery and agricultural sector, and also for aerospace industry. And some programs that were implemented is vocational training by online learning method, as well as providing infrastructure and equipment for digital transformation. And also, I really believe that digital transformation in the near future is very important. For Japan, implementation and go-to campaign for affected industries by holding public-private joint campaigns, promoting domestic investment for supporting the domestic supply chain, stimulating diversification of global supply chain, and also developing digital infrastructure through public investment. China, and also focus on digital transformation and integrating information and communication technology, increasing research and development, and the use of renewable energy in the manufacturing sector. And how about South Korea? South Korea is actually issued a Korean New Deal policy. This is an attempt to deal with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, and was announced last year in July 14, and they call it that this Korean New Deal policy is based on digitizing and green economy for Korea. So what I would like to mention here, that the trend of manufacturing sector development during COVID-19 pandemic and after COVID-19 pandemic will be slightly different than before. If we learn from other countries a policy direction for manufacturing development, they tend to be more on digital transformation based manufacturing, and also they will be going to green recovery, and they will be pursuing the green industry per se. So meaning that digital technology and new technology, research and development, as well as green industry will be a new trend of manufacturing development in the future. So I would like to mention here that the success of South Korea moving from upper middle income to higher income economy just only within 14 years. This is because the title of our discussion is Escaping Middle Income Trap. But even though Indonesia now is, South Korea is now already become a high income economy, but the thing is that they don't stop. South Korea doesn't stop to move forward. But the good thing that we would like to learn from Korea is that they only need 14 years to upgrade from upper middle income to higher income economy, which is 14 years is quite fast compared to the other countries. And Korea can also move from lower middle income to upper middle income economy just within 13 years. So in total, Korea only need 27 years to move from low income economy to become a high-income economy. But why Korea is successful? Because there are a lot of factors supported South Korea to move up to high-income countries within a considerable, very short time. The factors are strong human capital and institutions, strong innovation, strong industrialization and market reforms. And also it is supported by trade openness, prudent fiscal and monetary management for sure. Again, with this consistent policy, industrial policy, innovation, and other policy supported, then Korea can consistently grow, was growing at about 9.4% on average, while moving to middle income to high income economy. So this very high growth, economic growth is because of very strong policy, and also investment is very much become a driver of country's economic growth. And also in the last decade, Korea is actually an export-led growth economy, and 56.3% of its export is contributing to its GDP. So this is what we can learn from Korea. Then the thing is that Indonesia has a vision to really upgrade and escape from middle income trap before 2045. Before the pandemic in 2020, we actually have an exercise in Bappenas, in our ministry, if we can have the 5.7% growth average within 2015-2045, then it is estimated Indonesia will escape from middle income trap by 2036. But this exercise was taken before the COVID-19 crisis. But the thing is that due to the COVID-19 crisis in 2020, it was just launched by the World Bank several days ago. Indonesia has been stepped backward due to the COVID-19 crisis. As you know,
I'm sorry, Bu Amalia, you have
yes?
5 minutes. You have 5 minutes
okay.
left.
All right. In 2019 GDP, Indonesia GNI per capita is actually surpassed the threshold of upper middle income, meaning that in 2019, Indonesia already upgraded into the status of upper middle income country. But due to the COVID-19 crisis and the economic growth of Indonesia was contracted in 2020, then Indonesia is actually stepped back. And now the status of Indonesia become the lower middle income economy again, with the GNI per capita of 3,870, which is below the threshold of upper middle income. So with this situation, we projected that Indonesia can only come back to upper middle income economy within 2 years. We need another 2 years, meaning that we need another 2 years to come back to upper middle income position. So I think we need effort, and we need to put a lot of and strong policy intervention, especially industrialization will help Indonesia to improve and to increase the economic growth of Indonesia. So again, year of 2020 is actually the key moment to set out our foundation to escape from middle income trap. And we hope that in 2022, Indonesia can really manage the COVID-19 pandemic, and we can start to build Indonesia and do the consolidation for economic recovery. And we already been set the 6 strategies of Indonesia's economic transformation. We call it, this is the grand strategies of Indonesia. This is a new design of Indonesia's economic transformation that have been launched by my minister. And this is actually to redesign Indonesia's economic development towards inclusive and sustainable growth to achieve and to escape from middle income trap before 2045. This is the sixth strategy: competitive human resources, sectoral productivity, green economy, digital transformation, domestic economic integration, relocation of the new capital city is the sixth strategy. So again, industrialization strategy will be a critical factor for the success of Indonesia's economic transformation. And now we have 6 key sectors that we put it into Industry 4.0 strategies, and we would like to increase its competitiveness in the global market and transition towards advanced industries. To accelerate the industrialization in Indonesia, the government of Indonesia policy is actually to develop the industrial estates, and this is actually the 21 industrial estates that is prioritized by the government. And we have type of industry in each industrial estate. And one of the industrial estate, I call it in Morowali, number 16. It is actually the one that is successful already, and then it can really upgrade the economic growth and the prosperity of the local people in that Sulawesi, in mid Sulawesi, central Sulawesi. This is Morowali that have been successful, and also there is another one, we call it in Maluku, Teluk Weda, which is also now already operated, and then it also accelerate the economic growth of North Maluku province. And with these strategies, we would like also not only the industrial estate development, but also we would like to have a more inclusive development. So we need actually really to improve as well the productivity of small and medium industries through integrated program. And we would like the small and medium industries to be a part of the value chain of that industrialization process in Indonesia. So we have a lot of government intervention to really improve the productivity of small and medium industries. Again,
1 minute left, Bu Amalia.
Sure. Again, one of the policy that we now believe is to have a green recovery. So meaning that Indonesia also now promoting green industry strategy. Again, our challenge now is also the skills needed for industrialization. It is very urgent for Indonesia to accelerate the development of human resources to really equip the industrialization process in Indonesia. I think I'll stop there, and thank you very much for attention.
Thank you very much, Ibu Amalia, for the insightful talk about the government initiative. So as you say that we need another 2 years to come back to upper middle income status position. But of course, what we expect is not only the short term, we also want to see the future Indonesia achieving the high economic status to achieve the Indonesia Emas 2045. So the last speaker is Pak Agus, as a practitioner, as a businessman, who will explore the role of private sector, the role of state-owned enterprise to support the government initiative in the context of reindustrialization, especially related to downstreaming process, or as we know as hilirisasi, for the natural resource-based industrialization. Pak Agus will deliver this lecture in Bahasa. So Pak Agus, the floor is yours. Masih mute, Pak.
I think we
Yes.
have a bit mismatched information. I already mentioned to the committee that I would like to present my presentations in MPR about the how we go to 2045, a goal period that Ibu Amalia already mentions. And I suppose that my presentation is also very relevant with Professor Andy presentations. So please, I try to discuss in English as well as Bahasa because the time is so short, only 10 minutes. It's very difficult for me to express in such a way that I can manage my times very fast. I would like to share my.
Sorry, you have 15 minutes, Pak.
Yeah, okay. I would like to share my presentation. Is it okay?
Yeah, can you make
Yes.
it full
Okay.
screen, Pak?
So I presented my my presentations in front of or before the plenary meeting in MPR, yeah, People Consultative Research in March 14, 2018. So I would like to share with you my presentations, and I believe I can share something to Pak Ibu Amalia presentation as well as Pak Professor Andy. So I've been given a TOR about how Indonesia economy can reach the 2045, and then I develop the TOR with about 8 topics. How about the role in Indonesia? What is the positions? What is the performance? And how to reach the third high-income countries? What is challenge? Where are we going heading? And what direction? So this is actually my my presentation at the time. So I suppose this still actually valid for today's situation, except because the pandemic probably can be prolong the process. So this is the job for me from MPR at the time, how to increase the GP of manufacturing to become 30%. Still fulfill domestic needs, expand job opportunity, and strengthening export capability. So I try to see what's happened in the role of industry toward high-income country with the first revolution of industry when the water system power is invented, and then the second, the third. Now we are in the fourth industrial revolution. They said IoT. So this is, we cannot deny of this, and we have to face it. And we are. I also noted that in order to become a country which is a high-income country, we have to. Oh, sorry. This is very difficult. Okay. So I took note from the World Bank that a high-income country is about $12,000 US per capita, and the service industry, tertiary sector, R&D should be support the economy and also the industry, and good other quality parameter in human and life expectancy, education, etc. So this is the reference that I took. Let's take a look the comparison between South Korea and Indonesia development in 1960. So in 1960, actually Indonesia and Korea is not different so much, yeah, in manufacturing sectors. Of course, Korea has a 16% already at the time. Indonesia is still 8%, and then Indonesia now is already in the, at the time in 2018 when I presented this in front of MPR, we are still in the lower middle income country, and now we become lower middle country again. Let's take a look at the history of industrial development. So this is from 1970 to present. So you can see from 1976 up to 81, we are trying to develop industry to become import substitution industry, because we import so much, the economic growth so high, we need everything. We need everything, even at the time clothes and something. So when oil price boom, and then we develop many industry and start to produce, start to industrialize. And then when the oil price dropped in 1982 to 85, we understand that we need a little more high-tech industry. So we develop technology with aircraft, machinery, and shipping. And then again, crisis recovery period in 1970 to 04, we also try to survive with industrial revitalization, consolidation, and restructuring. Now we are in the phase of development of competitive industry through cluster and regional, also nature resource industry. Bu Amalia also explained how to achieve the cluster and regional industries through development of industrial estate. I think that one is the approach now being developed. Indonesia position is also improved from 1990 to 2016 in the manufacturing sectors. 1990, we are number 18. 2000 become 15, 2010, and then 14. And then in 2016, we is number 10 in manufacturing industry countries level. So this is actually the achievement since almost 50 years, 40 years. And then performance. This is the performance in 1977. Who is the backbone? The backbone of Indonesia is in manufacturing industry is, you can see, is the, what I wrote here is in the red one. So food and beverage, metals, and then transport equipment. Since this is the contributions and this is growth. What is the potencies? Yeah, the potential for the country to more industrialize and more to develop is about area, populations, and nature resources, because these can become an engine to grow, to develop more industry. This is the area that probably we can develop. Let's say, about the area size, we can have the we need a construction equipment, transport equipment, steel construction, steel communication, and etc. In the population size, we know we need, sorry, we need the primary, secondary, as well as tertiary needs for the society. This is all is the engine of growth for industry. And then we have natural resources. This is a very rare, because not too many countries has like in Indonesia. We have agriculture, we have forestry, mining, fishery, and other. So we have a plenty choices how to develop industry. And then we have to see also what is the futures for the country and also what the needs for export. We have so many potential about the natural resources, like I say. And then we have the very high potential in building high-tech technology, in communications and telematic industry. You can see that we are consumption is very high, number 3 at that time in 2017 in smartphone. And then, sorry. And then we have 160 million people. Island, of course, will make Indonesia plenty of the fastest growing market in terms of additional passenger per year over the forecast period. So, of course, in the MRO, for instance, the potential is 1.2 billion US dollars. In metal and gold industry, aluminum, nickel, tin number 3, copper number 2, coal number 5. So today, actually, nickel is one of the most needed by the industry, especially for the EV. Indonesia now is actually is a number 1, because when we wrote this number 4, because this is only for saprolite. But if we put it in limonite, so Indonesia became number 1. And limonite is actually very needed for constructing the EV battery in today's technology. Now, what is the challenge? The challenge is that the growth is slowing down. And then you can say that the export development also slow import, and import rise high. So this is the export. The contributor of export is food, chemical, basic metal. This is 3 areas that actually contribute a lot to industry and also economy. Now, the level of technology mastery is still weak. We can see this is according to our statistical bureau through the UNIDO calculations. We try to group it, and then the level of mastery technology for the time being in 2017, 43% is low, and then 23% is medium low, and in high only 5%. And then competitiveness of labor. We are actually engaged with 68% of labor, very low labor competitiveness. How about the export? So the export is also, we are too much relying to low up to medium. This is more 50% of low technology product that we export. And what we import?
Agus, you have 5 minutes left.
Okay, so what we import? Of course, high value added. So this situation is faced by industry to grow in the future. And then we are facing about mega trend industrial system that we have to run a business run as unusual. So we have a challenge also in bilateral and multilateral market liberalization, where there's not many instrument that we can actually protect the industry. We have a trade balance with many partner country, yeah, and then the trade balance is improved significantly. The lesson from liberalization case in Australia automotive industry, for instance, in 2012, they opened up the Thailand trade communities with Australia and Thailand. And what is it up in 2008, Mitsubishi Australia is closed. 2016, Ford Australia closed. 17, Holden and Toyota is closed. So this is the area that we have to take a look at. Not so many also instruments that can protect the industrial development. So this is the challenge of Indonesia facing now: permit, logistic, etc., etc. And then where is the world industry is heading? Yeah, high-tech industry. So according to many sources that I took, this is the area that probably Indonesia in the red color, in the red colors that actually potencies for Indonesia. I don't have much time to explain this, but life science, aerospace, automotive, energy system, advanced material and chemical, and ICT is the area that probably we can take a look. This is actually in line with Professor Andi presentations in the previous presentation. And I benchmark with development policy of several countries, what are they are going to do and what they are doing to improve technology. So what is the industry directions? So First, a rationale for development recommendation. Sorry. This is we have to prioritize subsector, infrastructures, employment, financial sector, fiscal and non-fiscal, attractive incentive, other factors, and selected priority industry. This is the priority industry that I proposed at that times in Majelis Permusyawaratan Rakyat. It's about 8 areas. And I also present what is strategy to do so in each group of industry that I propose. I develop about what is the strength in individual industry, what is the weaknesses, what the opportunity, what is the challenge. That's all. Now I think in the in my presentation, so I try to measure how to analyze. If I want to go to become 2045 as Indonesia a high income country, it means that the growth of the economy should more than 5% up to 7% along 20 years, more than 20 years. This is very, very difficult. And then what is the job for industry? Industry should grow in 8.1% per year from 2017 to 2045. So this is a very tough job for Indonesia. And then I heard today from Ibu Amalia that we have to extend 2 years more. So I think a lot of efforts should be done by the government as Indonesian peoples to achieve to 2045 that Indonesia become in high income country. So this is my conclusion and recommendations. We have to go to 80.1% in other in industry to become a backbone of the economy. So it can contribute more than 30% of the GDP to the national GDP. So the second conclusions that there are about A to H area that we have to take a look and then move forward to develop the sales in the industry. So we have to attract those investment. And then number 4, this is very important, that we have to strengthen the field of industrial manpower, especially those with the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So with the abbreviation of STEM. Yeah, this is the pre-requirement. And also we have to need a very high level mediator to attract the said industry. So this is the design of industry, I suppose, in 2045, if we can achieve Indonesia Emas. We have to have a research development, very good human resource. So with non-renewable and natural resources and renewable resources, we have to develop it. This is the industrial base, and then this is the champion industry. So we go to 2045 Indonesia Emas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Agus, for your valuable insights about the role of R&D and human resource, especially as the backbone of re-industrialization to achieve the vision of Indonesia Emas 2045. So due to the limitation of time, we afraid that we cannot ask all of the questions from the participants. There's a question from Asmiati Malik from University of Bakri, Ananta Evander from University of Bristol, Logisa Sukmana from High School in Indonesia, Mary from Industrialization Life, and many more. So I just summarize 2 questions, and then I will give the floor to first Pak Agus, and then Prof. Andi, and the last Prof. Arif to give the conclusion and answering that question. So for just 2 minutes for each speaker, I'm very sorry. So the first question is whether escaping middle income trap could only achieve by industrialization. How about the role of agriculture and extractive sector? Is there another way possible for achieve the high income status? So the role of agriculture and extractive sector. The second question is, how do you see the digitalization? We know that it is problematic, as your finding said that it's increased the polarization, benefiting only the high skilled worker. But on the other hand, is upgrading is makes sense, because given that only 12% of our citizens are graduate from the high educated or university. So do you think the digital divide will affect the inequality, and how the future of digitalization in terms of structural transformation of Indonesia? And the last is related to Industry 4.0, robotization or automation. How do you see it will decrease or increase the inequality? So many questions, but you have really short time. I hope you don't mind, just give us the most important thing about this session. So Pak Agus, how do you address these questions?
Okay, agriculture is still a backbone for employment, but we have to change from the system from traditional one to become more modern. There is no way that we have to go that way, because the productivity should be improved. And then for doing so, I think I go to the questions number 2 of digitalizations, that we cannot avoid the digitalization era. So in order to do so, we have to improve our education system. So I put in my notes that we have to focus in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics should be developed. In other, we can use digitalization as the tools for the industrialization. And the extracting sector is mining, and mining is one of the supporting Indonesian. We have very ample the power in mining. So what is the mining should do? We have to go to downstreaming. So not only digging and exporting, but digging with the process up to the downstream level, and then go to the component, and go to a digital product, go to automotive, go to aircraft industry. So we can get end-to-end system from the very upstream to the downstream industry. So that one should be developed in Indonesia. So the kawasan industry now is located near the tambang, near the mining, and then we have to take a look, and then of course we have to go to develop the surrounding area with their manpower, and then the capability in STEM qualification, etc. So it's not a good, this is not an easy job. Not easy job. And then the time is not with ours too. We have to accelerate, we have to work hard, we have to do everything. So I'm not a bureaucrat right now, so I'm the practitioner. So I can see that still a lot of headache that if we have to go to that way. So I think my colleagues, my other colleagues can answer the rest of the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Agus. So before that, there's the apologize from Bu Amalia. She has to left earlier because she is in San Francisco now, and it's still 2 a.m. So the next will be to Prof. Andi. How do you answer this question, Prof. Andi?
Thank you very much. I think they're really important questions, and I think I think many middle-income countries are struggling with the same kind of questions. On the first question about agriculture, well, it's true that modern agriculture can deliver higher value added. I think the issue is, given the importance of the agriculture sector for employment, modern agriculture isn't very good at creating jobs. So overall, modern agriculture and higher value added niche markets for agriculture could be very important for economic development, but I don't see it as a way of creating a large number of jobs. It will create some jobs, but not a large number of jobs for low skill workers in particular. So I think it has benefits, but it also has limitations. And then on digitalization and inequality, I think this is a real issue for rich and poor countries. And it's particularly difficult for developing countries. Digitalization inevitably, I think, will lead to increases in inequality because benefits to labor in the global economy tend to be very strongly related to education levels, and those are very much likely to relate to people's digital skills. And what countries, I guess, are trying to do is expand tertiary education, and that really sort of, I think, presents the only way to try and address this. But it's difficult because you're running against a kind of very strong currents. And then finally, I think relatedly, automation, Industry 4.0, I mean, these things will be very important for economic development and are important, but I think they will lead to issues around inequality. I don't foresee a destruction of jobs. What I see is wage stagnation, particularly wage stagnation for low income or low skill workers. So I don't see the robots replacing human beings in the near future, particularly outside of high income countries. But I do see far fewer jobs created, so there won't be the mass manufacturing employment that there was in the 1980s. And I think it's going to be much harder for questions of inclusive growth looking ahead. In some ways, when we think about these questions, governments can try and expand the higher education sector, try and build the kind of international collaborations between Indonesian universities and Indonesian scholars, which I think is really, really very important for all countries. I think in terms of the participants here, as Arif said earlier, I'd encourage them to make friends with scholars in the countries that they are studying, and I'd really encourage those links as important parts not only of Indonesia's future, but via UN agencies and international agencies, help supporting and building collaboration across many countries. These are difficult questions with no easy answer. Social protection, I think, will be much more important and relatively inexpensive. I think that's my comments. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Prof. Andi, for your insightful answers. And the last but not least, Prof. Arif, you have 2 minutes left. Just give us the shoot, give us the optimism about Indonesia leveling up is possible in the future.
Okay, on Industry 4.0, I just share you a study that we did on UNU website. That you can read yourself. This is a multi-country study including Indonesia, and then we have our paper there, so you can also read from there about routinization, Industry 4.0, and inequality. That's quite very elaborate discussion, so I'm not going to spend time there. But in terms of the agriculture sector, I think Indonesia is very low productive agriculture sector because so many people with holding very small size of land, and then you have to move those people from the village to somewhere else if you want to do that. So that's why Andi said it's not really labor intensive, but we can still say that we can live with agriculture. I mean, still have place, like look Netherlands, they have good agriculture, but of course it's very productive. So that's what has been wrong actually in Indonesian structural transformation. the non-agricultural sector cannot yet provide enough jobs from people to move from agriculture to better job, particularly in manufacturing and particularly in tertiary sector. So we have to work from there, from non-agriculture. So basically, we don't have a very good agricultural transformation in itself. On extractive sector, I think there is as I learned environmental and natural resource economics from University College London back in 2001 here. So from there, I learned that the only way we can still have extractive sector in the economy if we can apply what we call Hardwick rule. Hardwick rule means so treat extractive sector as we have a gold in our like drawer. So if you want to use that, make sure use the money that you get from that, change it to something else, not consumption, but another capital. So that's Hardwick rule. That's what Norway did. There's many other countries that has been successful in that. So we cannot just use up agriculture extractive sector without being reinvested in some other form of capital. So that's the rule. And then the last one is from South Korea. I think that many people tell us about South Korea. I think one thing that maybe cannot be forgotten is actually South Korea has been very good at the beginning in terms of the like giving bigger opportunity for everyone to participate in the development through higher education and things like even land redistribution. Yeah, so that's I think we should maybe last one look what happened in US now and Biden policy. Yeah, I think they are changing the very changing landscape of the economic policy there, where move more toward inclusiveness. So I think we should also look at what happened in America, a country that many people think is a capitalist country, but I think now has been something else going on there. So I think we should also look to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Arif. So Prof. Arif, Prof. Andi, and Pak Agus, thank you very much for this session. I really appreciate, and this is the end of the plenary session. I hope you enjoy the ISIC from now and tomorrow. And at the end, I will give this floor again to the MC, to Mbak Maria and Mas Fajar. Thank you very much. Let's give applause to Prof. Andi, Prof. Arif, dan Pak Agus.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.